I've been a waiter, a busboy, and once, for a humiliating 6 months, a mascot for a lobster chain where I wore a foam tail and danced for half-priced entrees. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the night Chuck Norris walked into Harmony Haven and changed my life, and everyone else's, forever. Night started like any other. Rain slicked the pavement on Sunset Boulevard, the air buzzing with that restless, city-sick hum. Harmony Haven, the five-star darling of the West Side, was glowing gold and warm behind its fogged-up windows. Inside, the dining room was quiet, classy, smug, everything in its place, and I hated every second of it. I was 5 tables deep, short on sleep, and carrying the kind of stress you don't talk about out loud. Hospital bills for my mom, student loans for my sister, rent due in 3 days. So when Laura, our front-of-house gatekeeper, suddenly stiffened at the podium like she'd seen a ghost in flannel, I didn't look up. I was refilling a decaf for a guy who had a Rolex and no soul. "Excuse me, sir." Laura's voice went taut, trying to sound both polite and superior. That very specific tone reserved for poor people and anyone without a reservation. I glanced toward the door, and there he stood, soaked in rain, mud on his boots, shirt clinging to him like it was afraid. Hair plastered to his forehead, the man looked like he'd walked through a war, or caused one. He wasn't just tired. He looked biblical. "Do you have a reservation?" Laura asked again. "No," the man said, "just that." One word, calm. The air around him stilled. "I'm sorry," she said, plastering on her trained smile. "We're fully booked, private events tonight." I followed her gaze. 8 empty tables. Linen crisp, untouched, waiting. "That doesn't seem too booked to me," the man said. Not angry, just observant. Which made it worse somehow. Carlos nudged me in the ribs. Looks like a barn rolled in and dropped off its scarecrow. I didn't laugh. Something about the man's posture. Shoulders relaxed, but his eyes, they weren't tired. They were measuring. Like he'd already assessed the weight of every chair, the escape routes, the distance to the kitchen knives. Laura flinched just a bit, then relented. Fine," she snapped. "This way." She seated him in the back, table 15. My table. Perfect. I grabbed my pad, took a breath, and walked over. At first glance, he looked like someone who'd fallen through a time portal from a Texas dust storm. But up close, there was something else. Something still. Like if the world went up in flames, he wouldn't flinch. He'd just walk through it and keep going. "Good evening," I said, doing my best to sound composed. "I'm Diego. I'll be your server tonight. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The man looked up slowly. His eyes met mine. I swear they were older than time. "A whiskey, neat, something solid." "We've got Macallan 18, I said. "Quake, we've got Macallan 18. It's $145 a pour." I didn't mean it as a jab. Not really. But in this place, it always was. He didn't blink. Just said, "I make it a double." I nodded, scribbled it down, and turned. But in that 1 second, Carlos passed behind me with a mop bucket. And I swear on my mother's last insulin vial it wasn't an accident. The bucket tilted. Dirty, gray mopped water splashed over Chuck's boots and soaked the hem of his jeans. Time froze. Laura gasped, Carlos smirked, and the man didn't move. He looked down at his boots, slowly, like a mountain considering an avalanche. Then he looked up. That's when the room changed. I mean, really changed. The lights seemed to dim. The clatter of plates dulled. Even the music died in the speakers. People didn't know why they felt it, but they all felt it, a ripple in the air like the moment before a thunderclap. Chuck Norris stood. "And God help us all." "That'll do," he said so quietly it made my teeth itch. Not soft, controlled, like someone who knew every word had weight. Behind the bar, Sophia caught the drink order and turned to me with a smirk that reeked of cruelty dressed in lipstick. "Your table 15 seems fascinating," she said, half laughing. "A Macallan 18 in that shirt? You think he's going to pay for that? You want to bet?" "Sure, want to bet." I shot back, but I didn't sound confident. I sounded tired. Chuck Norris sat there, boots still damp, posture loose but unshakable. You'd have thought the man had wandered into the wrong reality, like he'd stepped into our little curated circus by accident. But somehow, he fit. Not because he belonged, because everything else suddenly didn't. He wasn't glancing around, wasn't pretending not to notice. He saw it all. Every sideways look, every muffled whisper, every microscopic jab dressed as customer service. He was being judged. But not like some washed-up actor recognized under bad lighting. This was something worse. Dismissal. And it didn't bother him. That's what made it strange. That's what made it wrong. People like that suit-wrapped finance couple 2 tables over, they were trying to pretend he wasn't there. But their body language told the truth. Her legs crossed a little tighter, his eyes flicking over Chuck like he was calculating the threat. And across the room, the Hollywood clique was guffawing over drinks, trading screenplays like venereal diseases. One of them, a guy with a man bun and a velvet blazer, looked over and chuckled. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw his lips move. Homeless Clint Eastwood. That was the vibe. I came back with the McAllen, dropped it harder than I should have. Amber spilled across the white linen like blood and snow. I didn't apologize. I didn't need to. I had the power here, didn't I? Ready to order? I asked, not meeting his eyes. I tapped my pen, fast. Tap, 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 tap. Like I was daring him to break tempo. Chuck didn't flinch. He just folded the menu slowly and laid it down, fingers barely curling around the edge. What would you suggest? He asked, his voice like the hum before a tectonic shift. I stared at him. Was this a test? An act? Everything's excellent, I said, making a show of yawning boredom. But maybe you'd like to start with something basic. The soup's approachable, easy on the wallet. He tilted his head. Approachable and cheap, he repeated. My pen froze. He didn't raise his voice, didn't blink. Just repeated the words like a man etching gravestones with syllables. I turned before I could say something stupider. Back in the kitchen, Sophia stopped me with a glance. Or skating thin ice, she said, but there was a grin hiding in the corner of her mouth, like she wanted me to fall through. I shrugged and grabbed a bottle of table wine for a different guest. You saw him holding his fork, I scoffed, like he's never eaten off anything but plastic. Did you hear him ask if we had foie gras? Like he even knows what it is. I bet he ordered foie gras just to flex, Sophia said absently, eyes still on the dining room. Still, there's something familiar about him. I scoffed louder. Yeah, familiar. Familiar, like every failed country musician with a copy of The Secret in his glove box. Behind us, Chef Jules leaned halfway through the pass, squinting like a hawk. A Chateau Lafite, he muttered under his breath with ketchup. That man is the Antichrist of refinement. Jules was always dramatic, but this was different. He was watching Chuck like a zoologist watching a lion that had figured out how to open its cage. I brought the drink out. Second pour, McAllen. Glass polished, hands steady this time. But before I could say anything, Chuck looked up. Actually, he said, could you have the chocolate souffle started? I know it takes some time. I blinked. Dessert? Nobody ever led with the souffle. It was made to order. It required precision, and only 4 people in LA knew what it actually was. It's quite complex, I said, fumbling. Maybe vanilla ice cream would suit your taste better, Chuck smiled. Not like a friendly smile. No, this was the kind of grin they put on dragons right before they burn the village. The souffle will do just fine, he said. Then he added, almost like an afterthought, maybe you can enlighten me. What exactly makes it so complex? My throat dried. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because he wasn't asking, he was waiting. There was something in the way he watched me, not with contempt, but stillness. Like he already knew my next 3 moves and was politely letting me play them anyway. And suddenly I remembered something Sophia had said once. Drunk, laughing after shift, talking about weird celebrity rumors. She'd said, you know who never takes selfies? Chuck Norris. Because cameras ask his permission. At the time, I'd laughed. Now, I wasn't so sure. At a nearby table, the anniversary couple, the husband leaned close, whispering, that guy's definitely somebody. He looks familiar. His wife nodded, eyes lingering on Chuck with cautious reverence. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the windows stayed fogged, turning the restaurant into a soft-glow film set. Everything moved quieter now. Slower. like something big was holding its breath. Most guests were gone. Tables wiped, chairs stacked. Only a handful of diners remained, as if summoned to witness something they didn't understand yet. At the eye of it all, table 15, Chuck, unmoved, unfinished. Diego approached with the check, hands sweating around a leather folio that felt more like a death sentence than a bill. $3,147. 85. More than his monthly paycheck, more than anyone like that guy should be able to afford. He stopped at the table, adrenaline buzzing like caffeine and static. "If you'd like me to walk you through the breakdown," he said with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's a big number. Wouldn't want any confusion before you disappear." Chuck didn't flinch, just reached into a weathered wallet and pulled out a matte black card, its edges sharp, its design minimalist and cold. Diego hesitated. The card looked real, felt it too. Heavy, metal, sleek, but that only pissed him off. More acute, he muttered loud enough for Chuck to hear. I didn't know Monopoly made premium editions. He laughed, sharp, mocking, and spun on his heel. "Give me a minute, sir," he added with venom so thick it stuck in the air. Back in the kitchen, Sophia intercepted him like a bullet. To tension. "What was that?" she asked, eyeing the card in his hand. Diego waved it in the air. "You won't believe it. Metal card. Probably forged in his garage. I swear, who the hell uses metal unless they're compensating?" Sophia squinted. "Wait, metal? Yeah, a fake ultra-elite wannabe crap. He's either a TikTok magician or some washed-up cowboy actor. Bet he's got a podcast called Whiskey and Wisdom or some nonsense." "Diego," Sophia said slowly, a note of concern threading through her voice. He ignored it. Moments later, the doors slammed open again. Diego marched through, now dragging the mop bucket. It sloshed with the murky leftovers of a night's cleanup. Bleach, grease, resentment. A dishwasher looked up, startled. Sophia stiffened. "What are you doing?" Diego didn't break stride. Teaching a faker what happens when you try to run game in my place." He stormed toward table 15, eyes wild, bucket swinging like a weapon. The entire room seemed to tighten, a low hum of tension. Fork stopped midair. Conversation stuttered into silence. With no warning, he heaved the bucket, water and filth cascading across the table. It drenched the linen, the glass, Chuck's jacket, and his lap in a single grim tidal wave. The scent of bleach and sour mop water burst into the air. Chuck stood fast. The scrape of his chair was the only sound. His movements weren't panicked. They were trained, disciplined, controlled, dangerous. He didn't shout, but his voice came low, measured, the kind of quiet that makes glass tremble. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Gasps echoed. A woman at a nearby table dropped her fork. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Diego tossed the black card at Chuck's chest like a slur. It clinked off his collarbone and landed at his boots. "You think we've never seen this trick before?" Diego spat. A walk in, rugged look, fake confidence. Flash a black card like it's a movie. "You're nothing but a street rat with good posture." Chuck bent down, slowly, calmly, slowly, calmly. He picked up the card and looked Diego dead in the eyes. "You didn't even try to run the payment," he said. "How do you know it's fake?" "I don't need to," Diego snapped. "I've seen 1,000 of you. Dirty boots, borrowed charm, talk like you read wine labels in a mirror. It's all a show." "You made a hell of a judgment," Chuck said, voice still low. For a man who hasn't checked a single fact. Diego's face twisted. "You think I can't smell it? That stink of desperation? You think quoting a few French dishes makes you belong?" The hush across the room deepened. Even the candles flickered smaller. Sophia stood behind the bar now, frozen. Thomas, the manager, had emerged, his expression blank, but his mouth parted in horror. No one moved. "You came in here looking like some rejected Clint Eastwood stunt double," Diego raved. "A mysterious silent, like that's a personality. But you're just a con man in denim. Dress poor, talk rich, but don't expect anyone to believe it when the bill comes." Chuck didn't speak. He just picked up a cloth napkin and wiped his jacket. Slow, unbothered, perfectly precise. Then he said, almost to himself, "So let me get this straight. You never ran the card, never verified a damn thing, But you dumped mop water on me because you decided I was beneath you. Diego gave a dry, bitter laugh. Oh, come on. You expect me to run that card and act like it's not from a cereal box? Chuck's gaze narrowed. Not anger, not indignation, just judgment. And you think, he said, that calling someone dumb while holding a mop is a clever move. That's when Diego faltered, for the first time. His bravado cracked like cheap tile underweight. You're not fooling anyone, Diego sneered. You think pulling out some shiny card and playing Jedi mind tricks makes you somebody? I've dealt with junkies cleaner than you. Either you pay, or I'm calling the cops. Chuck's eyes flicked toward the manager, who stood frozen behind the host stand, caught somewhere between protocol and disbelief. So no one here's interested in the truth? Chuck asked evenly. Just this guy's mouth and a bucket of filth. Diego stepped in close breath, hot with arrogance. And if you're gonna run a scam, old man, at least run it smart. You're the dumbest fake I've seen all month. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. The kind that reshapes a room. Chuck stared at him, unblinking, not furious, just measuring. And then, with cold precision, you're going to regret that. The card landed on the floor with a soft clink, spinning once before resting face up on the hardwood, black, gleaming, understated. Chuck bent to retrieve it, slow and steady, like he'd done this before, like he'd done worse before. He studied it for a moment, turning it once in his hand, then looked up, eyes like a still pond before a storm. If this card doesn't go through, he said, voice low and deliberate, I'll take full responsibility. Cops, press, shame, I'll wear it. You'll get your viral moment. Diego rolled his eyes. And if it does? Chuck asked. Diego scoffed, dismissive. What? You want me to tattoo an apology on my ass? Chuck didn't blink. No, just answer the question. Diego paused, then grinned. Fine. If that piece of scrap metal actually works, I'll mop this whole damn floor with a toothbrush. In a clown wig, singing the national anthem on Instagram Live. He raised his arms theatrically. Happy? Chuck nodded once. That'll do. Diego strutted to the terminal, still laughing under his breath. You really want to go through with this? He called back, voice thick with mockery. I don't want to hear you cry when it gets declined and they haul your ass out of here. Chuck said nothing. He just watched. Beep. The machine blinked green. Approved. The word hit the screen like a gavel. Oh. Diego froze. His breath caught, his mouth opened, then closed. He stared at the machine like it had betrayed him. Wait, that can't. Chuck stepped forward, took the card and slid it back into his wallet like it was nothing more than a library card. Funny how that works, he said. Quiet. Tired even. I gave you the truth. You chose humiliation instead, because it made you feel tall. Diego looked shattered, pale, rooted to the spot like a statue with no meaning. Exactly, Chuck interrupted. You didn't even try. He straightened the cuff of his damp sleeve, water still dripping down his coat. It's easy to judge a man by his boots or his jacket. But real power doesn't announce itself. It waits. And it watches. A voice from the back cut in. Smooth, knowing. He's in trouble now, said a man in a tailored navy suit. He leaned forward from his table, eyes locked on the card. That's a Centurion from Titan Bank. Metal, minimalist, no name on the front. You don't apply for it. You're invited. Iso turned, blinking rapidly. I didn't. The man shook his head. And that's the problem. You didn't even ask. You just assumed. From another table, an older gentleman stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his wine. His eyes went wide. Oh, wait a second. I knew I recognized that jawline. You're Chuck Norris, aren't you? The survival doc. That commercial. The gear thing. A ripple passed through the room. Gasps. Whispers. Then a Chuck Norris? A no way? Are you serious? That's really him? Phones came out like lighters at a con. The restaurant became electric. Reverent, stunned. Diego stepped back like he'd seen a ghost crawl out of a mirror. Chuck just exhaled. Long, controlled. He pulled a damp napkin from his coat pocket and wiped his hands clean. Slow, precise, as if ritual mattered. I didn't come here to be recognized, he said softly. I came here for dinner, like anyone else. And then, louder, not angry, not proud, just true. You never know who you're talking to. That's why you treat people with decency. No one moved. Even the flames in the votive candle seemed to pause. Diego blinked again, throat dry. You want me to sit with you? After all that? Chuck nodded once, motioning to the chair opposite. That's how we start again. Not with apologies. With understanding, Diego hesitated. The dining room was empty but for the quiet clink of silverware being laid nearby by Sophia, who gave him a small, uncertain nod. He stepped forward, pulled the chair out with shaking fingers, and sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. A server approached, someone Chuck hadn't seen the night before, and poured water into their glasses without a word. The candle between them flickered gently. Chuck leaned back. You ever mop a floor in silence? I mean, really mop. Not just clean, but think. Hear your own breath while you do it. Diego looked down at his lap. Sometimes. Then you know what it means, Chuck said. That quiet, where you can't lie to yourself. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the receipt from the night before, dry now, but still smudged with water. He slid it across the table. That's not for you to pay, Chuck said, reading Diego's concern. That's just a reminder. This wasn't about the money. Not ever. Diego stared at the paper like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I thought you were a fraud, he said finally. Some stuntman trying to look rich. I didn't even try to check, I just assumed. Chuck nodded. We've all made assumptions, but the ones that define us are the ones we don't fix. A soft clang echoed from the kitchen. Somewhere a pan had dropped. But neither man flinched. I saw the video, Diego said, voice low. I couldn't even watch the whole thing. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. Chuck took a sip of water. That's your conscience doing its job. Let it keep working. Silence again. Then Chuck smiled, small and tired. You know, I was going to order the lamb again, but I'm thinking tonight's a burger night. Diego huffed out the barest laugh. A medium rare? Chuck raised an eyebrow. Of course. As Diego stood up, gathering himself, he paused. Why me? He asked. Why even bother? Chuck didn't hesitate. Because someone once gave me a second chance, and it changed everything. Diego nodded slowly, then turned and walked back toward the kitchen. Not with shame now, but with something else, something straighter in the spine. Something straighter in the spine. As the kitchen doors swung open, Sophia met him halfway. You okay? She asked. No, he said. But I will be. Back at table 15, Chuck unfolded his napkin, laid it across his lap and waited. The younger man hesitated, but the weight of the gesture was too heavy to ignore. Slowly, he slid into the seat opposite Chuck, unsure whether this was mercy or punishment. Their dinner began quietly. Salmon tartare, short ribs, and fig tart for dessert. The food was exquisite, but Diego barely tasted it. The guilt settled heavier than any wine. Chuck set his glass down gently, the stem catching the flicker of candlelight. He leaned back, eyes distant but grounded, holding something unspoken. You know, he began quietly, voice low and steady like distant thunder. I've sat across from generals in war zones and children in refugee camps. I've shared 5-star meals with presidents and crackers with people who didn't know where their next bite would come from. He looked directly at Diego, not with anger, nor disappointment, but with a tired understanding. What I've learned is this: who you are isn't about the clothes you wear, the card you carry, or the room you walk into. It's about how you treat the people you think can't give you anything back. Diego's jaw tightened, his eyes glassy, shame sinking deeper with every word. Chuck continued, voice steady. You thought you saw nobody walk into that restaurant, a man who didn't belong. You thought you could mock him because that's what the world teaches us, to look down before we look in. He exhaled slowly, and for a brief moment he looked his age. Not a legend, not a name, but a man burdened by what he'd seen. I've been to places you'd only see in charity ads, he said softly. Places where kids drink from puddles and mothers trade their shoes for rice. They have less than nothing, and yet somehow they still find it in themselves to offer kindness, to smile, to share. Chuck reached inside his jacket and pulled out something small, an old woven bracelet, frayed at the edges. He placed it gently on the table between them. A little girl in Cambodia gave me this after I helped fix the water pump in her village. She didn't speak my language. She just smiled and tied it to my wrist like it meant everything. It wasn't worth a penny, but to me it was worth the world. Diego looked down at the bracelet, then back up at Chuck, his throat too tight to speak. "You poured mop water on me because you thought I was a fake," Chuck said softly. "But what you really poured it on was a chance to be better than that." His eyes locked onto Diego's, steady and unwavering. "You were handed a moment to see someone, not just judge them, and you wasted it." A long beat. Then, with a small, almost weary smile, he added, "Oh, but here's the thing, kid. I don't want to ruin your life. That's not why I'm here. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in change." Diego blinked, a single tear slipping down his cheek. Chuck leaned in, elbows on the table. "If all this, the video, the fame, the fallout, means anything, let it mean that tonight was your turning point. The night everything cracked wide open." He paused and added with a faint grin, "And for what it's worth, the lamb was perfect. Just try to keep the bleach off it next time." Diego laughed quietly, real and raw, like something inside him finally broke free. Chuck raised his glass in a silent toast to second chances. This time, Diego didn't hesitate. He lifted his glass as well, voice low but steady, but to not wasting them for... In the flickering candlelight, with a meal between them and the weight of redemption hanging in the air, two men, one a living legend, the other a humbled young man, ate together in silence. No cameras, no noise, just understanding, growth, and a quiet vow that from this night forward, things would be different.